Call the meeting to order at 6:01. So we'll stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a motion to accept the agenda.
Moved.
There, a second. A second. Anybody have any additions to the agenda? So did you all get this, net current expenditure that Scott had sent out? Okay, well, I will send it out to you, and if you wish to discuss it or have questions, we can talk about it in the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so I will send that out to you. Rather than having it come out of the blue tonight. Okay, so there be no changes to the agenda. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, may I have a motion for approval of the January 18th minutes?
I move.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Fran.
Nancy, I
Any-
just want to do a quick test to make sure that you can hear me
I can hear you.
and I can hear you. Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the screen go black at one point and I thought,
Yeah, so maybe it's.
I can see and.
okay. So, no additions or changes or anything to the minutes? Okay, there being-
Unless we have to change the Board of Ed meeting because it wasn't January 31st. But
But that was changed
Right.
after that meeting, so I think that's fine. Okay, so all in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? Okay. Any correspondence, Bonnie? No, I didn't think so. Okay. Our tax collector has made an appearance this
I
evening.
know, it's so
nice
much
to see
fun to
you.
come to a meeting, you went home and go back.
Wow, all right. So you did send a report ahead of time, but we decided to stick to it.
No, things are just chugging along, it's still, we still have months to go, but we're working on it.
If you're on track.
Yes, that's, those are the deterrents.
Okay.
And it's part of my discussion last week about, tax sales, registered letters have gone out. One person, I've broken it down to, I just really want you to pay this year the years that are behind in my criteria. One person has done that, so it's one person off the list. And most of them, there are a few who are bigger, but most of them are $5,000 and under. So I am hoping that through one way or another, this will work out, they will get paid.
How many are there?
10.
And in terms of characteristics, are they mainly elderly or is there anything they have in common? That group?
No, you know, I have trouble classifying people.
Gotcha. Oh, I was wondering if there was some common thread in terms of a problem that, you know.
No, there are a couple of people who do live, who are not Kent residents,
Right,
which
gotcha.
I just cannot reach. They have gone off the grid.
Mm.
So I think they will be sales.
Gotcha.
Have you had two sales pending the last time we talked? Were there two sales that you were anticipating?
I'm anticipating the two that I cannot get in touch with,
Uh-huh.
and they're more than 1 year behind in the schedule.
Right,
and-
but was there one that you had actively, that was going on sale?
No, I
Okay.
have not started anything formal.
So there's nothing lagging, which we already had underway.
No.
I think you did, if you were preparing us what might.
Yes, I'm taking this very slowly and I don't want anybody to say, you never, oh,
Right.
here we are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Board of Education, welcome.
You don't want to come up to the table?
If you'd like.
Good morning.
So what we've been talking about the past couple meetings, potentially moving the money in the capital plan line from our sidewalks and paving down into the roof line. I've got the approval of the facilities committee and the full board of education. I'm sorry I didn't email these to you, Nancy, but I can email them to you tonight. Minutes of the motions.
Do you want to read it to the group?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, here. Kathy Baxter, do you?
Your glasses, they're over there. Let's try these. So the Facilities and Safety Committee met to discuss the current proposed town capital plan. Scott made a motion to move the money in the sidewalks and paving project, which totals $407,705. In addition to any money that the KCS Windows project, and the KCS roof project. Linda Meyer seconded the motion. There was unanimous yes vote from the entire committee. And then the Board of Ed. Gonzo Garcia Pedroso made a motion to allow Scott Trabucco to request from the Kent Board of Finance to move funds from the Kent Center School sidewalk line item to the KCS roof line. John Grant seconded the motion and the motion passed unanimously. And we forgot to include in the Board of Ed motion the lines from the, but I am confident that in the motion from the Facilities Committee, we included the windows and the vestibule line as well, and I forgot to include that in the Board of Ed line, but I'm confident that they can work that also.
And in terms of size, how much does that take, how much of the, what we expect to be the escalation in the roof, cost, do you think that, how much of the thing is that?
I think that's gonna hopefully cover it. The problem is the sidewalk and paving line doesn't come fully mature until a couple of years. So I think there'll be some more mechanics after.
And the other question simply about it is, and what about our sidewalk paving needs?
Well, so that was, as we also have talked before, I think what would make, what I talked with the facilities committee about and the Board of Ed is that I had mentioned to the Board of Finance that we would be looking to encumber some funds at the end of each year if we had any left over. We have that contingency line in our budget that we usually don't spend to try to start building it back up. It would be slow. I mean, it's like $400,000. I don't know when we get that back, but we realize what's going on with the capital plan. We don't want to come to the town and ask for more money. So everybody was on board with trying this approach. And it'll leave us on a little bit of a hard spot with the paving, but.
And do you need paving right now?
I mean, they're patching, it's not like for death and it's not ruining the building, so. Sure. I think it's less of a.
But it's not what we're gonna have to.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's definitely.
So any residual money, any balance we have at year end, could that go into a 2% non-lapsing fund for them to then be
It has to
marked?
be done by action from your board.
Right, right.
And any of those funds, they have to be capital funds, right?
And it's not that they can take it
No,
out.
I can bring out our operating budget, 2% of our.
Yeah, if it's, it's allowed now, but only 2% of the bottom line. Yeah, if you got more than that, the town definitely goes back to the town, yeah.
Okay. And this kind of works at cross purposes actually, but we're starting to think about next year's budget and I've been asking about a contingency line. And apparently it was recommended by the Board of Finance. We put in that 4,000 contingency line. I don't know, I was wondering, wouldn't it make more sense to just put $40,000 in an account for us so we don't have to tax for $40,000 each year? I know it probably works out to about the same. We send it back to the general fund and then we take money from the general fund, towards the next year's budget. So I'm sure it's a wash fiscally for the town, but it just.
My experience has been that boards have been typically, the towns don't allow boards have been to have contingency lines. I don't know that that's what I was, that maybe that is what I was on the board about.
I think it might have been before, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, it's my understanding that they
I
asked.
had a
for-
little hiatus there, so it might have been that.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, I wasn't on the board either. And so I was asking, why do we put 40,000 there? The best practices percentage of the total, and I was coming with that 40, and they told me that the Board of Finance requested that we put in $40,000 on
Interesting.
it.
Any recollection?
It might have been Mark Sabetic when the board that was asking for money for HVAC stuff. he was suggesting that it get put in every year. I don't remember, I'd have to actually get back.
I could ask Marty if, you know.
I'm not sure it matters.
Yeah,
No, it's just, it's interesting that you have, it, yeah.
I mean, of course, you know, that works against us. We could do money for the sidewalks if we didn't have that budget, but, you know, I don't know, just to bring that up. Like I said, it's probably a wash fiscally for the town, right? Because it's money goes into the general fund and then back out every year, so
Exactly.
it's not really
Yeah.
probably a big deal,
Mhm.
but that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
But I don't know what the timeline for considering that movement in lines up to the capital fund, but we would need to get with, start getting with Sam to get our timeline, to get our ducks in a row for the state.
I think that there are some other people too that are asking to move money in the cap plan. So
It has to go to a town meeting, so you'd be able to do it at the budget meeting when they pass.
Moving it down the line has to go to a town meeting.
yeah,
Because
they-
you're in effect putting it to an entirely different project.
so they would have to approve it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
taxpayers
So
have
we
to-
wouldn't know until May.
Yeah, because that was the same concern that I had about the pool money, that they wanted to move.
Right, that taxpayers have to approve that.
Exactly, yeah.
That's part of it. It says it in the statute regarding capital. So anyway,
And with that, then we would have to deal then also with the fact that the sidewalk money is maturing in time.
if you wanted to get it pre-funded, that would have to be would have to do that.
Let's see, so, yeah, you're only in your third year for 2024, so you've only got 2 years in the bucket so far, 5.
Yeah. I think they only broke it into 3 for the sidewalks, so.
But did they, oh, so you don't have any in the bucket yet?
Right.
Oh, right. All right.
But as you're, for next year, you expect the roof number combined with the paving sidewalk numbers, probably like what I said going into the roof.
What I did is I took the latest updated estimate and I added 8% like he was suggesting for our new project that we're putting into the capital plan. So with his new estimate plus 8%, it comes out to like, I think we're 406 short, and I think there's 407 in that sidewalk.
Okay.
So I'm hoping, but we won't know until we get there for sure. But- And just as a reminder, that's the full cost of the project, but we would be expecting an $800,000 reimbursement from the state. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
I said that'd be sweet.
A $300,000 reimbursement from the state, probably, but that would be after the fact.
And are we therefore in the capital plan as that we land on, and the revision is gonna be to take those two numbers basically and combine them into the roof number, or?
Oh, I think that's a discussion for us to have.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, as we look at the impact of, as it flows through and the budget and such, yeah, in the bigger picture, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I apologize for being late. Just to clarify, so the monies are allocated to the roof and they're put aside for the future when the roof is being done?
Yeah, so for this year's capital plan, we're submitting a new roof project that will be done in 2034. The roof project that I'm talking about here is one paid for the capital plan 4 or 5 years ago. And the money comes available to us in 2025, but the roof warranty is already up and leaking, so.
And it didn't reflect basically the new realities of supply chain and everything else in the roof costs. So they're trying to deal with it by moving some things around as much as they can, at least to myself.
There wasn't enough money set aside. for
And the $300,000 you talked about getting back from the state, that's for the roof?
Yes, that would be for this first roof project that would be that we're looking to have done next
This comes from
next.
24?
Yeah.
I was thinking that. And is there any chance that the federal infrastructure law and monies that went into effect, that there might be monies there for us?
I can check, but I don't think so. you know, the state has a school construction reimbursement grant, so that's the 300,000 that I'm talking about. That we get reimbursed from the state, but I can look into the federal infrastructure bill, but I don't.
And it's just to be regular roof, or is there
Yeah.
notion of putting solar or anything like that?
Well, we are in the middle of trying to get a solar deal done on the roof. It would be a different section of roof because, you know, this one needs to be replaced, but I don't know, we just are having the hardest time getting them to get back to us, so.
They're very overwhelmed right now. They are flat out.
Michelle sent them an email, I think after our last meeting here, or your last meeting, and we got an answer back about a week later. And there's been some problems with the amount of square footage they estimated that they could put panels on, and they came for their final inspection before we really hit the go button and realized that there's not as much room as they had expected. So it changes their calculation on whether it's feasible for them to do financially, so.
And when did that start that process with them? Because my question, of course, was there are more, you know, at this point, vendors, even if it's a more competitive space.
There's better grant packages now also.
And is it worth kind of saying, hey, at this point, maybe we just start all over?
Personally, I think, yes, it is worth saying that, but I think this process started about 2 years ago, right? With the conservation committee.
But it is light years, right? I mean, it's that technology has just moved, so, you know.
But the thing that the Green Bank is so interesting is that, if you don't mind jumping in, is that they bank any energy that you don't use,
Right.
and then you get it back. And then you also have basically a guaranteed rate per kilowatt hour for 20 years.
Well, you know,
And they can walk you through every.
they are allowed to change that rate.
Oh, really? That must have been next week.
But what the leverage is we can refuse it, and then they have to come and pick up all their panels. You know, so their incentive is to keep it lower than the market rate, you know, so you say, okay.
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, because the panels lose their efficacy over
Right.
the years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm expecting that the Green Bank is gonna pull out of the deal at this point for us. By the time it got, I forgot where you started, right? By the time it got to us, it had been going through the town for a year at least. And we were considered the only building that would meet their criteria, so.
Yeah, I think it started a little bit, and then they do like a desktop assessment where they're working with Google Earth and their software to see of those 11, which is feasible. And I think it got down to either 7 or 6, and then they come and do an in-person, and that was when it was like, nope, the only one that would be eligible and would meet all of the criteria.
And that's the response.
Yeah.
I know both Litchfield and Watertown, their schools have a field next to the building, so that they're not just restricted by the square footage of them. And I don't know if
I think our facilities manager loved that,
Right.
I mean, there was not unanimous enthusiasm for this deal at the school, but I think we felt, you know, that it had been going through the town for over a year. It was up to us, and, you know, it was doable, so we went ahead of it. So now we're kind of at the mercy of, I think we can still pull out if we feel they're gonna do something that would be detrimental to the building. But we've kind of narrowed down our options by now because we've signed the PPA agreement, the purchase price agreement. So we're locked into a kilowatt rate hour, you know, which is really good right now. I forget what it is exactly, but.
And so the answer is, if it falls apart, you won't be upset, but if it goes forward, you've got benefits that you basically have locked within it.
Yes.
So, right. Okay.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing about the fields by Kent Center Schools, we don't own them. They belong to Kent Center. They belong to the Kent Schools. So, yeah, so I don't think that they'd go for that.
Well, maybe given that they are helping us on their property tax fund, it might be something to go with. Well, or technical level that perhaps we can try. I would say everything is
No harm in asking.
That's right. You know.
And Wendy Murphy is rounding back on that whole Green Bank project, and we are now in very, very middle discussion through Wendy, where they think that it would be very feasible to have basically like a carport situation in the entire parking lot and have the whole thing be covered. So, I wonder for your.
We've suggested that, you know, we said we'd be willing to work with you to do something like that, you know, and so we just have not been able to get, you know, we got the email back saying, oh, yeah, we're still working on it. So I at this point, I don't see the change in the calculation. But the incentives are so much better now, you know, if our deal goes through, that electricity can only be used at the school. And their goal is to put enough panels on there to provide 80% of your energy use historically. So if for some reason we stop using that energy, we still have to buy it. And we can't transfer that to any other building in town. Which is what I didn't like about the deal. But the new package, you can, like, they could put, I think the firehouse roof is the best roof, it's the newest, the strongest, it's got the pitch, but they weren't using enough electricity. We could put them there and use them on any, for credits on any.
Yeah, like up offset, send it over to Templeton.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that, huh?
Which is, if it doesn't wind up working, it probably with Wendy, you know, let's take another look at the whole thing, because who knows, everything has changed, so. Ain't got nothing to lose.
Yeah, just the last 2 years.
Right. Well, all of a sudden, as you know, even the folks around here who are doing their homes, all of a sudden, and selling it back into the grid.
Absolutely.
So just things have just changed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or something, financing our own.
Right.
Then we own energy.
That's right, you got it. Okay, so it's interesting, and I'm glad you guys are on it.
So the discussion about the state doing the 300,000 reimbursement for the roof project. So that money does go back to the town. It doesn't go to the Board of Ed budget. It goes to the town. So just to clarify that. Okay. Got anything else?
No, I just had a question, you know, we had talked about how these meetings are hybrid, but how would somebody join remotely to this meeting? Because there's no link in the agenda.
It's on the town website.
Is it, there's a link? Okay.
Yeah, Bonnie sent that over to.
No, because they're in-person meetings, they're not officially.
I don't think we get a link.
Because we don't have enough bandwidth or whatever to do it. Is that why they can't be?
No, we didn't have this.
So why wouldn't we
so
do it now?
Yeah, we're still, I think there's just a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done with the sound because of the way that the room is, so the ceilings. And then we need a few pages of instructions for everybody, but we're so close. So
But our goal is
Yeah.
basically to make our meetings hybrid so that citizens
Absolutely.
can watch.
Yeah, that's been the intent for
Right.
some time. Yeah.
So under FOI, the reason why the link only goes out to the committee is because there's this old statute that says committee members or agency members can participate. I think it says like telephone or something.
Yeah, right.
Old term, when there used to be like conference calling, the old fashioned.
Yeah.
I thought it was in place already. So I was wondering why nobody was showing up.
Okay.
So now all thing is this gets recorded and they then can see it after the fact, so it's just not participatory.
Or they can come.
Right.
Okay.
So, can I just add, there is a camera too, I guess we're not seeing that.
That's
Yeah, I don't know why it's.
right, because it gets posted, I know, after the fact, that's right.
But I do have it up here, and we've been watching and we can see the whole room.
Right.
So you think it's being recorded?
Oh, it definitely is, that's why I did the little test
Okay.
outside.
All right.
But I mean, video, so.
Yeah, I don't know why that's doing it, it has been on all day since 8:30 this morning, so it's just,
Right.
yeah, I don't know. But we are recording and it's recording video.
Once it's fully hybrid, will the citizens who aren't here be able to participate orally in questions?
During public comment, yes.
And what are you looking at in terms of time lapse?
I'm hoping that
Like that's
It'd be great.
Yes.
Okay, no, thanks.
Thanks, Jen.
All right, so Jane, you're up.
Alrighty. So we had three, excuse me, budget workshops so far. One was really devoted to capital. The last two have been operating. At the first operating budget workshop, the board came to the conclusion that they would like to meet with any of the grantees that have put in increases in their requests. So we did that today, and I think it was 6 organizations that we met with. And we kept it to 90 minutes. If you have time to go and watch that meeting, it's a really, really valuable meeting to watch because it gave all of these organizations, the literacy volunteers, for the library, all the church service, all the different cemetery association, gave them an opportunity to sort of have the floor and talk about their process and how they serve either the region, but we had them really focus on the services that they provide to Kent. I think it was really valuable. So if you have 90 minutes, I think it would definitely be worthwhile to watch. We did have a resident, Andy Osif, came to the board requesting for the board to include funding for a second resident state trooper. And so we had a discussion about that. I'm waiting for some information back from the troop on a whole slew of questions that the board asked me to get. So hopefully next week we'll have those answers and we'll be able to consider that request.
And that's not a town decided, I mean, that's something at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen.
Right, whether we put that funding into the proposed budget that we would move to you.
And is there a suggestion as to what the duties of the second trooper would be?
It would be as a second resident state trooper. So instead of having one in town, we would have 2.
But it doesn't involve the school.
So it would not be to fill that the SRO capacity. I think that if there were 2, it would give some more flexibility to have them spend some time in the school, but there wasn't anything specific in it to the SRO. It was strictly a second resident state trooper.
So right now we have this resident trooper, how many days a week?
He's 5 on, 3 off.
So that would enable us to have somebody 8 days a week.
In
Hopefully,
a sense, yeah.
yeah.
And, having a backstop and having, especially in the summer where we have, a lot of visitors coming to Kent.
But they wouldn't work the same shift on the days they work together.
Yeah, there's only 7 days a week, so there would be some overlap, but I would anticipate that we would work with the troop to make sure that they're not just adding a second person, 5 on, 3 off.
And since we know what a trooper costs, I guess have you also looked at some of the other options, which is if you have one trooper, is it one trooper and the equivalent of a constable or a security person or something who can do traffic without having to spend as much time as you would if it was a trooper, for instance?
We can, and we do use overtime hours for troopers for traffic control on, heavy weekends. Andrew and
I
I.
know as I raised this as having gone through this on the school,
Yes.
there were 2 threads out of this. One was the issue of what happens in the school. The other one was, I thought pretty clear from the voters that they also just weren't happy about the size of the appropriation, frankly. And so I just, in terms of, context, it wouldn't be bad to look at some other options also to demonstrate to the voters that we actually heard it and we're being more sensitive about how we address that even.
Yes, so I've asked out to 2 towns because I really only know 2 other towns that have constables. They both are actually moving back to the resident state trooper. They're
Are they doing it for one or for a second? See, because my big question is, if we have a state trooper fully baked financially, can we therefore then afford maybe to not have to take as big of a chunk and do something that is secondary to a state trooper, which would provide a budgetary savings and give us more coverage. And I only say that obviously from a financial standpoint, policy wise, I'm not going in, but it's- I do think it's an issue perhaps that you guys need to.
Yeah, so I am looking at that. So what I've done is I've reached out to 2 other towns that have constables, and am getting their budgetary numbers. I also spent a number of hours over the weekend really just hitting out to the Google search to find out what all the costs are. And there are a lot of costs, more than every time I thought I was to the bottom of the spreadsheet, it would lead me, some search result would lead me down to another piece of equipment or what have you. So it's not as simple as, a constable can be hired at this, so it'll save us this much money. There's a lot of considerations, but I will hope to have that within the next probably 4 or 5 days is my plan.
What happens if there's a need for somebody on one of those 3 days when the trooper's off?
So there's what's called a PAT 1, so it's a patrol 1, is we share one trooper that patrols Warren, Washington, and Kent, which is, I think it's about 120 square miles. So they may be in Kent, they may be in Warren, they may be in Washington, working, patrolling. If there's if there's a call for service, they would
So that's in
attend to it.
addition to our resident.
That's when, yes, well, that's when he's not on duty. There's always, as far as I know, a patrol 1 trooper on, but that's basically our law enforcement on the 3 days off.
And do we know how busy the existing state trooper is?
So
You said there were some numbers, I think you had.
yeah, I got updated numbers from Andrew recently. I think where they are.
And I'm sorry, who was it who made the request for the second?
Andy Osif, so he's a very long time resident, and he was our resident state trooper in, I think, the 60s. Sure, let me think.
We're in the 70s.
Was it like 69? So the total in 2021, I'll just give it to you by year, was 1,571 requests for service. And of that 1,571, there were 41 motor vehicle crashes. And for 2022, it was 1,610 requests for service and 45 motor vehicle crashes. But that doesn't, there's some stuff that doesn't account for. If Andrew is at the Patco, for instance, and someone walks up to his car and says, asks for some sort of incidental assistance, and he doesn't necessarily, it's not a full response, that wouldn't be counted in this, but that's the number of requests for service via 911 or their 7-digit number. So, moving on. We've had
So by the way, just one thing, so you're saying, and in this budget roll-up, this is going to be addressed, whatever the solution is that you come up with.
Right. Yeah, we'll likely be talking about it at either next week's or the following week's meeting. So phase 2 of Streetscape is moving along, but it's moving along. So we met with SLR and they have a basic a preliminary design plan, they call it, and because so phase 2 is Lane Street, 341 east to the firehouse, both sides, and then continues on all the way to Stewart Farm on Maple Street extension where the affordable housing is, and then south on Route 7 to the Greenhouse and South Commons. I got everything. Cover everything.
So the 1 and 2 were all in the proposal with the state that we got however much of funding towards, correct?
The phase,
Phase 2 is 80% funded by the
Gotcha.
federal government.
Right.
so, in the discussion that Rick and I had with SLR, they were concerned, we were concerned about the remarkable change that would come to the Main Street piece. Because right now there's no sidewalks there, there's a lot of parking right along the roadway. So they are going to be holding a property owner informational session, I think next Tuesday. And it's really just to hear from, let the homeowner, let the property owners know sort of what the strategic view of this is gonna look like once there are actual sidewalks with a granite curb, where you're not gonna be able to park on where they're parking now. And just to sort of set the expectation, but also walk through any ideas or concerns that the residents of, those property owners have. And we'll likely do one over on Maple Street because it's sort of a similar situation over there.
And in terms of cost, budget, overruns, change orders, et cetera, in phase 2, are we gonna bake into this? I know we had a little ambiguity about who owns the change when it was related to supply chain or whatever it was.
Yeah, we're so far before that,
I know, I'm just saying, but we still had dealt with it in that once. I'm just saying, I assume or hope or advise that it'll be clear,
It's gonna be contracted.
This process is a little different because the federal government requires that we have a liaison with the state, and the state is the liaison with the federal government. So everything we do has to be approved by this liaison. So they're really holding our hands all the way, which is great. They are making sure that compliance is being handled all the way up and down every single line of this. So we're very fortunate, I think, to have that liaison.
But that verbiage does need to get in the contract before you sign it.
yeah, for sure. I have a lessons learned.
Correct.
Yes, it absolutely 100% is. So that's sort of where that is right now. Again, very early stages, but moving along at a good pace. And like Barbara said, having that liaison who is almost like a concierge, where when we had to do the ad in the paper for the design engineer, they were like, here's the template, just do a find or replace with town of with Ken, and you're good to go. It's compliant.
Well, pretty much, we fill it in, then we give it back to them, then they approve it, then they give it back to us and say, okay. But they really, really are spending a lot of oversight on that.
Yeah, which is great. It's good for us, because we have limited resources. Those are the high points of just stuff in general.
Thank you.
So I gave everybody my reports, two-sided, same as usual. Transaction information on the top, budget versus actual in the middle. Budget highlight notes on the bottom, and the back side is building inspector. I did have a discussion with the auditor. He'd like to be put on your agenda for the March 15th meeting to come present the financial statement to you. But I don't even have a draft yet, so he's gonna have to.
Yes, move it along.
Let's go.
Anything in particular you want to point out, Barbara?
Nope, no, it's January and early February is relatively quiet for everybody except for the tax collector.
Any questions?
So the town hall agreement is with the
Yes.
And that, although it's small relative to whatever, is there ADA money or anything else that offsets that, the elevator stuff, just it's an elevator? Or-
Not that I'm aware of, no. It's just old.
Yeah, and they're very expensive. to
Right.
replace.
That's why I think anytime you can kind of rationalize that perhaps there's an opportunity there, we gotta.
And we're lucky that we're not sharing. They had the hearing here today that I was mentioning, because their elevator failed. And so they couldn't hold meetings because they were out of compliance with ADA. It's a much bigger. Yeah.
It should go to school for that reason, so, yeah. Okay.
And I've just been busy doing budget stuff for the selectmen.
Not busy, yes. Yes, yes. Okay, so there being no further questions or anything? Okay. So we'll move on to the proposed capital.
You know what? After your last meeting, you approved a budget for the. I think I got a copy of it.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding.
I thought I gave it to you. No. Okay, my bad.
That's okay. I just know we made some change, so whatever that change is, I haven't captured that. But
Yeah,
it was, but it was.
pretty dull, actually, the whole thing. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. All right, well, I'll go take a look for it after the meeting, rather than wasting everybody's time sitting here.
Because I thought it might be appended to the minutes, but it wasn't.
No, you should have emailed me, I would have, yeah. Okay. All right.
So, capital plan.
Mhm.
We had a really good, robust conversation. And we were able to, so we started in that fiscal 2028. When you look at the number that is down at the bottom, 2,719,536. We had started out at 3,404,536. And we were able to move around $685,000. And that's how we got to this number that you see. So we first go to DPW, because the Board of Ed, there were no changes to. So if you flip over to the back, you'll see in all of Barbaro's call-out boxes,
Right.
a lot of changes to the left of the black line. And those are all due to either supply chain issues or, wildly increasing costs for vehicles, chassis, you name it. So you can see that in 2024, that truck number 9 increased $20,000 going out to 2025. That truck number 4 went up 15,000 up to 2026, where the truck number 12 increased 10,000. 2028, the truck 8 increased 55,000. Then to the right of the line, we continue with truck, is that 3? Yeah, the right glasses on.
And what are these trucks? These are basically just maintenance trucks for
They're like spare, yeah, state dump trucks that, that move around materials and.
and
plows.
it's a broken record of them. My question always is capacity. I mean, especially if you look at the costs going up, which are out of your control. And always my question is, what percentage of each truck do we actually use? And is there, any room for us to think about somehow, to get assuming that it's not 100% utilization, whether there are some innovative ways of looking at it, whether it's with sharing with other towns or something that bring maybe our share of it down, because it's a lot of money when you add it up.
Yeah, so the problem is that if you're sharing
snowplow, for instance.
Right.
Everybody uses
the snowplows at the same time.
And are these all snowplows?
No,
That's
No.
fine, see,
they're
that's a,
different
Some of these are,
purposes,
half of them are snow plows, the other half of them are daily work trucks.
right? And different, yeah, they have different
Sure.
functions.
I think one of the bigger things that this shines the light on is the fact that Rick puts a truck in 5 years ago and he's had to change the price 4 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Because by the time it actually gets to purchase date, it's quite a bit more expensive than when we started. And that's really evident when you look at that truck number 9.
Is there any resale value?
He always trades in and we always get whatever that trade-in value
Well, and the
is.
other
Yes.
thing is there, have we ever looked at, you know, whether it's insurance, whatever, how you can might be able to lock in something at some cost?
Purchase a truck 5 years from now?
Believe it or not, I mean, you know, almost anything can be discounted and securitized.
There's so much volatility in any large commercial trucks. You look at ambulances, you can't find a chassis in the country.
Oh, I know,
for
that's not
18
my question
months.
is having spent a lifetime in this business, there is always a guy with an idea out there who's willing to ensure you're locking on a price for a price. Is the only, okay, so that, and I'm just saying, you know, that's what my question is, maybe nobody has unearthed that, but I will bet you if you're like with any other kind of a contract, if you say 7 years out, we've budgeted for it to be this, is there a price we can pay to lock that in?
Motor vehicles, I think the price that you would pay would be prohibitive. The question becomes, who's gonna be around in 7? Which I'll take the other side of the question, which is how, with all of these numbers that presumably were increased at the end of November, how is anybody predicting what the cost will be in 28 or 29?
I think Rick verifies the price every year.
Yeah.
As he reviews the capital plan, he makes phone calls to his suppliers.
As to what the suppliers are gonna tell them what it's gonna cost in 29,
No, he uses based on the numbers that there are today.
and then with some
Escalation.
agreed upon inflationary number. I mean, let me go back and.
I don't think he does
There's no
do
issue.
an inflationary number. I think he bases all the prices here on today's costs. And then a year from now, when those costs change from today, he will change them again.
It's possible the prices could go down as well as go up.
Right.
That'd be nice.
So it is a possibility.
Ask a basic question, remember who doesn't understand. It is the 5-year capital plan something required by the state or something?
It is in order, yes, in order to qualify for LoCIP grants, yes, you have to have an approved 5-year capital plan.
LoCIP grants or what?
Local capital improvement projects, which Rick usually saves up his allotment for a bunch of years and then spends it all on one thing, like a big bridge or a big road repave or something. Or you could get your allotment every year. I'm not sure exactly how much our allotment is this year, but it's somewhere around $50,000 a year.
This capital plan format was created to assist in budgeting management and to smooth out the impact to the taxpayers by funding for 1/5 of each of the projects within the 5-year period over a period of time. So if you've got a very big one that can come in, it is not devastating to the taxpayers in any given year.
And that's customary amongst all tier towns.
No, it is not. I worked in towns that have no capital plan.
They may have a capital plan, but they don't tax for it.
Yeah.
So it's more about also the.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy, yeah.
And why do we have the 10-year plan?
because it's good to know for planning purposes what else is coming down the pipe. Because if we know that the fire truck, A is gonna be needing to be replaced because it's, 20+ years old, over a certain time period, it's good to know that that's moving into the horizon. The same with the equipment that the Department of Public Works has too. And school roofs and swimming pools and splash pads. All the things that, they're capital elements of our community.
It keeps a good perspective.
Yeah, I think it helps. And so hopefully there are fewer surprises.
I think with vehicles, there's a huge shift to EVs. We all know that, right? But there's even a huge shift at the state level. I think by 2030, all state fleet vehicles they won't be replacing that with fuel vehicles. Everything will be moved over to EV. We know that there's going to be funding coming down the pipe to move to EV for everything, for not only obviously consumer, but
And funding from the feds.
because the push for with climate change is massive.
Well, and the others are looking at your numbers, for that. So you're saying there's potentially some upside should EV conversion or whatever shift might affect those numbers favorably for us, because that's new money.
It may,
Could be, right?
it may, as far as some grant money coming in, but I imagine those vehicles are going
More
to be
expensive.
much more expensive. And then the infrastructure.
Right.
need to have.
And most of the time that the feds push grants out to the states and then push them out to the towns. It's all dependent on the wealth measures of the community, and communities either considered better off, get a smaller chunk of the pie.
Which does bring to mind again, I know you had, talked about this idea of, pooling with a couple of other towns on a grant person or someone who has their eye on the ball and finding some money out there. Have you made any progress on that?
I'm actually meeting with the first selectman in Washington on Friday morning.
It's like almost everything that comes up, there's a component to that now.
So vis-a-vis the detail on the public works, we would be buying a new truck number 9 for $290,000. And is there an existing truck number that's replacing?
Yes.
So that's a net number, basically.
That's his estimate as to what it's going to cost and how much it's going to get traded.
Okay.
So those were sort of highlights that I wanted to make sure that we had visibility on.
Question for you, truck number 8. Could that be split to be funded between 28 and 29? Just to try and move things out of the current year, because it's going to be a
Yeah,
pretty big nut.
I think I talked to him about that, but I will definitely ask him again.
And the same question for let's see. Now, the note here says that Fuller Mountain, there's a note next to bridge number 5. Is it bridge number 5 or bridge number 9?
That note goes to
16.
yeah, 16, the one below it.
Anderson Acres. No, I'm talking about the note for, in 29, and then out years, above that one. There's bridge 5 and bridge 9 above that, and there's a box in the, to the
That's
right.
to the 300,000, I think.
Okay.
Those two. So, yeah.
All right, so we already moved that up once, so, all right.
The increase in the fire department, increase in rescue number 8 from the.
So if we can, I just want to wrap on DPW. So we were able to move things around and that cut was 150,000 of the 685. And then if we go down to the fire department, it originally was in that communications upgrade, in that second year it was 125. But they told us that it could go down to 100,000, so we reduced that. And then we moved out engine 2, the second line item. We basically moved that whole truck out 1 year. So it now starts in 2029 and ends in 32.
And with the fire, we own those, correct, the town does, or is it the?
No, the
So we give them to the fire department.
fire department holds the
Title.
So I mean, I frankly heard this from folks in other towns who have looked back on that and wondered if it's the most prudent thing to do when you have, especially the shift in terms of who's working there, et cetera, and then you have this other entity that owns the engines as opposed to the town, and it does give you, the question is, should we just be looking at where that actually resides, at least on paper? Because there are some risks to them not being owned by the town. And it's financially, it's the same thing, it's just where it's going.
I think if the town owned them, then the town would be, it would be on the town's insurance, right? Obviously. I'm just trying to think of other, I've seen it in different ways.
Right.
Obviously municipal departments, everything is wrapped up in the same fiscal
Our town where there was a dispute with the not-for-profit, and basically they walked off with the equipment. Yeah, so that's, so, the only thing is, as we go, at least start spending money going forward, I might want to be a little more observant of what the locations are.
There were criminal charges against those people.
Oh, I understand.
Don't we have an agreement in place anyway?
Yeah, there
with
is
the
a
department?
fire services agreement.
So does it say that the equipment reverts back to the town?
I believe it does.
And so does the firehouse. So does the firehouse.
Right.
Reverts back to the town when.
Because, it's interesting, because right now, that world is changing, I mean, just because you don't have the volunteers that you used to, so there is some scenario down the road where whether or not things get sold or, privatized or something, that if there are assets in it and we're not actually being compensated for it. It's just something, not to make a big deal out of it, but it's just something going forward for us to be aware of.
Keep it in mind.
Right.
So again, just trying to understand what goes on. In the budget that was approved last year, there was for rescue number 8, 200,000. And there was 225,000 for 24. So in essence, we reserved 200,000 because it's 425,000 for refurbishment. And then and for the same rescue number 8, there's another $700,000 coming down the pipe.
So in I believe it was 3 years ago, they actually missed the deadline to submit their request. That's why there's a gap year that you see in the 4 years that are to the left. But so the 225 in 2024, the 200,000 in 2026, 200,000 in 2027, 300,000 in 2028, which all adds up to 925 is the cost of the replacement for that truck.
And that's gonna come on in 28.
That's when they'll be able to go buy it.
Right.
That's when it'll be funded, 100%.
So we're accruing for it.
And they cycle they try to cycle the trucks based on NFPA, the national standard that.
And the monies that are allocated to it, they come in from the taxpayers. This past year of the 200,000, that is, where's that cash?
That's sitting in the capital fund,
In the capital fund?
yes, which is separate from the general fund.
Earmarked for.
Correct.
The capital fund is invested in.
Mostly in stiff.
Which is actually giving more money right now, right?
It's like almost 4%.
Right. I'm having it down, all of a sudden, that's an important number again, right?
So again, to wrap up the KVFD, there was 224,000 that we moved. Going down the list, there were no changes. Park and Rec, they proposed.
What's the Emery Park, what's the 104? Is that just?
We understand.
Do we know what?
Yeah.
Playground.
That's for the playground there? And is that, are they gonna keep a playground there besides what they do?
Oh, I don't know.
They don't know. I mean, that was evident
Right.
in the presentation.
That's right.
So we started out at 435 for that category, and we were able to move 135 over, and that included the basketball out 1 year, and the vehicle that was at the bottom of that category, we moved that out 1 year. So that was.
So that 100 may not actually be at Emery Park, it may wind up being the new stuff that we're doing in Kent Commons.
No, that $100,000 has been approved for Emery Park. If it goes to a different park, it would have to go back to taxpayer approval.
And the playground that Kent Commons was, what was that?
That's already paid for.
Came in a number of years, yeah.
Okay.
So yes, different buckets. Reval, we didn't do anything with. Going down to town buildings, we were able to move 150 over. We moved the town hall windows, replacement of the town hall windows, over into that 2029 year.
So why do you have 2 lines for town hall windows, or excuse me, I see sidewalks, beg your pardon.
Just going back to Park and Rec and for the procedure, so that $100,000 was in for fiscal 24 in the budget that was approved last year. So that means it's good. I mean, once something's in there, is it in the selectmen? Well, I guess you're moving things around so you can change what was there last time for the budget gets proposed.
Right, we're proposing, this is what we proposed.
Right. So you could.
We're proposing tonight.
Right. So there is authority to say, actually, don't want playground.
No, there's authority to say we aren't going to pay for the playground this year, we'll pay for it next year. But the taxpayers are the ones that approve the projects, the categories are.
And I guess, again, just on Emery, therefore, I mean, given that you're doing this Kent Commons project, right, with the rec equipment. And I'm not just thinking like the taxpayer, and we're doing 100,000 in Emery that basically does the same thing, or?
At the playground. I don't know what the plans for their playgrounds were. You gotta remember that $100,000 was put in 5 years ago.
Right, that's
So
a
that might
deficit.
have been a different plan 5 years ago than there is this year for that.
I think that was at the end of the last Park and Rec director's time. So
I think we'd like to know,
how much
right?
money has been put aside for the pool already? I'm just looking for,
150,
okay, so it's 250 total.
right, but this 100 is for playground, not for pools.
Okay, I'm just collecting information.
Is there no line item for the Kent Commons playground?
It's right there. Where
It's in 2029.
Yeah, but there's 20,000 in 2020.
For,
I think they have money in the current,
Yeah.
already,
So the
Funded.
23, okay.
no, yeah.
Right, which would be on this list.
that's Kent Common other.
You're looking at the future. I think there's money already
This
The
money.
budget.
in the capital.
Yeah.
I think she
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, this is how.
What it is.
Bet you do a little bit wider.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, now what?
How much has already been accumulated?
Because I would love it next week or from there, I would love.
Well, you
to
have,
do
did
it.
you have a project balance on the capital detail?
Yeah,
But there's no project balance on the.
because there's not enough lines.
Yeah.
There's more projects.
How can we get that information?
I gave it to you at the last meeting. I gave you all the capital projects and all the current balances at the last meeting.
We're watching.
That's part of my. Should be.
I guess, I mean, I guess, what are the leader from our park and recs director? It's been a
He
while.
presented at the.
Capital plan meeting, and that's where we got a lot of
That's right.
about the splash pad.
Okay.
Um,
And more about Emery, just because.
Because as we kind of have this,
Right.
you know, it's a black hole there that's never gonna get us anywhere.
Well, part of it is for the Park and Rec Commission to decide what they're going to do.
Exactly. Right, I love that.
There's a process that they have to go through.
That's right.
And there was a.
Capital project status.
Kent Commons.
Looks like
Right.
That money has been, but they have a project and it's gonna happen.
Oh, no,
this
I was
summer.
fine with it. I guess the only thing is, as we've kind of shifted more towards that, for me, it's more just wanting to be mindful of the fact that we've still got this commitment in Emery Park, and should we just keep an eye on whether or not that's the best use for Parks and Rec to use it there.
That's their decision.
But I just want to make sure that they actually made
The balance
a
is all the way
decision
to
that
the
was
right.
mindful of that.
And there's 50 there.
No, the balance is all the way to the right.
No, I read C.
Tells you what it starts with.
Right, okay, got it.
And all the project names are all the way to the right as well. The middle section of the report just sort of reflects activity this fiscal year.
So that wasn't what you said us last.
It was what I, yes.
Okay, the reason so that says that's something important enough for us to keep in every meeting with
And this
ourselves.
was dated 12/21.
Right, then the time.
Right.
Last,
Okay.
yeah.
It's probably the January meeting.
Yeah, because I don't update it every month. Okay. So is there money in there on that to answer Tegan's question about the Kent Commons playground?
So yes, there's 50,000, there's 100,000. The balance is 100,000.
Between project was 40
Right,
and appropriations 10.
so the balance, the final
The
23
balance
balance.
on that day on 12/21, I said that was that far.
Yeah, yep. Lot of moving parts.
Yeah, but you can see the number of projects there are.
That are
If I
funded.
tried to add those to this page
Right.
too,
Yeah.
it'd be 3 pages
Oh,
long.
no, now that I know, I just have to pull that page, right? So that's.
Yep,
How much use is Emery Park?
right now. The pool's
You know, that's what I also use from our workers, which is, that's why I just wonder the question is in terms of where the money's going there. The hiking stuff seems to be a value add. The cement pond or whatever you want to call it, which is the runoff and everything else, seems to be a never ending nightmare for us, you know? And it just, from my perspective, in terms of the capital budget, at some point, we just look at the whole thing and, you know, and do they make certain that the balance between the two is correct, or are they, at some point, do you give up on that pool and
I
figure
think
out?
it's an active conversation that the commission, that
Yeah.
the Park and Rec Commission is having.
Yeah,
Okay.
when Matt presented to the community, he talked at the Capitol at the January meeting.
Right.
He talked about, and he was looking into the possibility of being able to have the community access pools that are indoor and set up specific times that the community could utilize those, which would then elongate the amount of time that the community would have access to swimming pools. You wouldn't have the elements to deal with, and taking care of it would be somebody else's. We just have to pay, I'm sure, in some fashion. So, part of it is to see, I think a lot of things are in process right now with him.
So conversations with the athletic department, Kent School, have been very positive, and they're
And then you did also
creating
the club
programs.
getaway, right, during the week.
So that's for the summer camp, right? They're actively discussing creating, building programs for, swim programs for aquatic programs, I guess is the head.
Didn't Kids School today open up that for this weekend for kids, the swimming pool and the skating?
I don't know if it was swim,
Yeah,
it's something was coming.
It's open today by Kent School by the students.
You're right.
Where is it?
How would you find that?
You have to have a look, yeah. I saw it on.
But the Emery Park pool is closed.
It's been, it's a, we had bacteria, all kinds of stuff.
But it's closed.
For swimming.
Well, something needs to be done at Emery Park.
Right.
The money's been sitting there for quite a while to repair the floor, and it hasn't been done. And honestly, I would be swimming there in the summer if it was
If it were
open
open.
right now.
It's more than the floor.
Well, but nothing has been done.
Right.
Nothing, how many years has that 150,000 been sitting there?
And that's where, when I look at it, I say that
I'm
capital. is- that's-
extremely disappointed that nothing's being done about Emery Park. I mean, I grew up there, I grew up on the swim team. I mean, it's just been sitting there. And it's like you're starting this whole new project at Kent Commons, and you're just shoving Emery Park to the side because nobody wants to deal with it.
But now that we have ADA issues, we have to work it out. And it's a
Has a whole
spring
runoff,
fed.
right?
So it's spring fed. I mean, it's a natural water pond. It's not chlorinated,
No, we had
it's-
snapping turtles.
and the kids had fun
Yes,
catching
they
them,
did.
so.
I never got sick.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a neat place, until we'll see what Park and Rec comes up with. I mean, it's really there. It was-
On their agenda.
It's
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Right.
they got a lot on their agenda, I think.
Well, they have a very enthusiastic park and rec director,
Yes,
so.
he is
I'm sure
terrific.
he will, yeah.
Yep.
Wishing makes it so.
That's it, huh?
We've come to the end. Which is, the number at the bottom.
So those numbers are pretty sobering.
Right.
At the bottom, yeah, that's kind of thinking sheet, that capital appropriation policy that we got the draft of. And holding the annual amount to under 8%, and it's like, it's not looking like 8% to me. So, yeah, that's later in the agenda, but,
Well, and also just, these numbers are big,
yeah.
and at some point, I do wonder, is it something worth pursuing? In a perfect world, when you have a consultant come and just look at this and say, gee, are we doing everything we should be doing to manage these numbers? There might just, I'm just wondering if there's something we're missing, which might enable us to bring this under control in a different way and get some economic benefit out of it, that maybe we're all too close to it.
I don't know, I think part of it has to do with the information that's being brought forward about the different entities.
Right.
And part of the proof of that is if we look at the capital project status, to see, well, okay, so were there certain entities that look like they might need more help
Right.
than others? And just others may be smaller, you know, we just kind of see. But that's certainly, you know, because not a consultant is going to know everything about every single thing.
Right, that's right.
And they're not free.
That's right.
So,
No, that's actually, but once the numbers start getting like this,
yeah,
$30,000 on a consultant might be money well spent. You know, if, you know, because I just don't have the answers, you know.
no, I did,
Mhm.
yeah, and the thing is, it's not as if these things aren't necessary.
Right.
You can't do without them. So we're gonna need to look at this in tandem with the budget that gets brought forward from the selectmen and the board of ed and see what we've got to work with in the overall scheme of things. Unless anyone has any specific thoughts about what they're seeing this evening, I don't know if you have.
But it's completely logical,
That's
yeah,
it.
it's like.
Yeah,
Right, you know,
That's-
it is what it is, right?
that's the problem, yeah.
There was one project that didn't get moved, but it is new, is the Swift House, so we slotted in 3 years, 28 through 30,
Mhm.
$200,000 a year. For full renovation. We did put out an RFP for basically an assessment on the building to hire an architect. That went out to we had 2 proposals that went to the Swift House Task Force. I know they met about it last week at some point. And just asked for their recommendation. So once they give that back to us, which will likely be for the February meeting, then we have to, the board of selectmen needs to discuss it and because that's not in the budget. So they have
Well, the
to
other
come
thing
to
is
you
with
all
Swift
to-
House, of course, is in a year, everybody has opinions on it. But also at the end of the day, and I know you had a task force which was looking at it, but how much value does that add, given all the complexity because of the age of the building, et cetera? And I've always also wondered, terrible thing to say, but is there some better use for capital than that, and including selling that building and maybe deploying it somewhere else in something that is easier to manage?
Right, and.
Not that there's a right or wrong answer, but again, would love to ask the question.
Yeah, we, just in November submitted our affordable housing plan to OPM, and we need to have more affordable housing in our town, and it's a spot that's in town. It just seems to me that would be a great place to have converted into some affordable housing. I don't know what that would look like, it's just.
What would it do to the historical look of the building?
As opposed to, frankly, you sell it to somebody who, would restore it for some commercial purpose and then take that capital and deploy it elsewhere.
Would
In
they
our
want
capital.
the Veterans Memorial in their front yard?
Well, if it was another fancy restaurant or something. maybe you can't. But more than I'm just saying that I wonder,
Yeah.
right, it's a lot of work when you look at that thing, and then what's the payoff gonna be?
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it, yeah, have specific uses that are identified for it?
So we did a survey, it's a regular survey, and they're on the website, and it was really the lion's share of folks were looking to have it remain for civic use. But there wasn't anything about what the possible costs would be, and it,
They like
it was
the bill,
unknown.
I guess.
Right, so there's definitely, a sensibility that that's an important piece of our history and our town. So there was overwhelming, I would say, support for civic use, where versus some of the other choices were maintain it for possible expansion when, as we outgrow the space. So there were a couple of different options, and it was the lion's share of folks chose that.
Well, that's the
maintain it for
most
civic use.
intimate of spaces available, I think, for community events. Then you've got the church parish houses, and you've got the community house, right? I mean, that's basically, and I guess this meeting room here at Town Hall. So,
There's, I think, the sort of new leadership at Kent School, there's been some more civic stuff over at their big auditorium, like we had that the green energy workshop there that Wendy Murphy brought a bunch of vendors in and a bunch of speakers. So that, could be a space that would get used more. That's pretty much it.
Something to keep an eye on.
so does anyone have any thoughts on making any changes to the capital plan at this time?
I'll ask Rick about that truck 8 and get back.
Is this one opportunity to do that?
No, it'll be, I mean. we're
This is
taking-
not speak now or forever.
No, it's much further along in the budget process, but when we are looking at the, the total impact of all of the elements of the budget coming together and what our resources are looking like, for us to determine what we want to do regarding the mill rate and, using any of the reserve funds or anything like that. Okay, well, I guess we'll move on to the capital plan. We're all very quiet.
Thank you.
So if you don't have a draft of the audit yet, Bonnie still can't complete the annual report, can she? Okay, well.
And just, it should be 21-22
Right.
annual report.
Oh,
It says
sorry.
20-21.
Sorry, you tell you still.
I just noticed that.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. All right.
Can I just ask if has the report been submitted to Hartford? Is that what we're waiting on, or the audit?
No, I haven't even received a draft.
Okay, I thought there was, the last meeting, there was a mention of a January 31st deadline.
It's been extended for another month.
Okay. Well, that took care of those two items, which takes us to the capital appropriation policy. Did you all get a chance to review the 5%?
I have not, at least the last version I have. Yes.
So. I've got a couple of typo things, but as far as substance. There was some verbiage that I was gonna ask about. And then in the process, underneath, on the first page, the second paragraph, where it says the BDMAC require additional funding for an approved project during the 4-year savings period, just submit the increased request to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance for approval. And then I was just gonna insert something to the effect of to add to the capital plan and be, and the question was, it can be funded with unexpected project funds in the capital plan.
I didn't follow anything you just said.
Sorry.
I don't have a copy of it in front of me.
Oh, all right,
And
but yeah, okay,
actually,
so we're not
this is
prepared for
your
this tonight.
document. I've only been acting like the secretary and typing it up for you guys. so-
Right, but your perspective is most valuable.
Right. But the state statute really dictates a lot of it,
Mhm. Mhm.
so I tried to pull in as much of that.
You sent us that in December, right? That's actually.
I did.
Yeah, you did. So, and then, yeah, there were a couple of things that,
I wasn't on the board.
yeah. You didn't get a copy, Casey?
Of the,
Of the
State
statute?
statute.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a previous, yeah.
I just need
Okay.
to.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
It doesn't sound like we're ready to do this now.
No.
Okay, so we do need to move forward with this. So, but the one thing in here that, you know, as I said earlier, maybe chuckle was, you know, we would target to not have our capital be more than 8% of our budget. So for any given year, so we're gonna have to think about that too. So please review it and be prepared to address it at the next meeting. So we are prepared.
And the last draft, or what date that was?
This one says, the one I have says 1/18/2023.
Just as a point of information, not having been to a budget hearing, when the town needs to talk about the budget, do they focus more on the capital or on operation?
You never know. You never know what's gonna come out.
The presentation includes the full budget, so.
Yeah.
We try to devote some time to every part of it.
Usually the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed are available to answer questions and, yeah.
The capital plan was already provided, or the initial capital plan provided to the taxpayers at the town meeting in January. So that's like their first peek at the capital plan.
Which is on the town website.
Yeah, that was.
But now it's been modified since then, reduced as Jean just talked about.
Exactly.
So in what was approved, town people, last spring, the total for projected capital for 2024 or budget capital was $1,293,474. And now it's 1,471,115. And I'm not good enough at math to figure out exactly what that percentage is, but I guess my question would be, is that a customary increase?
It's a big increase.
It's a big increase from what?
Yeah.
Which usually happens yearly.
I mean, there's usually a little bit here, a little bit there, but what's been happening is that everything is just skyrocketed. Yeah. Okay.
And then we'll just stop out and it's still there. It's back.
Yeah. And then there's other stuff behind it waiting to come in, yeah. So. That's where we are. So, are there any comments from the, are we done with this? Any comments from the public? Here, please.
Elaine Harris, for to read it. And a couple of things I'd like to discuss. I was Park and Rec, I was on Park and Rec for many years.
Does she need to come up closer to here?
I'll be coming up to that, yeah, because you're being recorded.
So I was on Park and Rec for many years before I was pushed out earlier this year. As far as their capital budget, the previous commissions went through the splash pad numbers. In the end, we found out that it was not a feasible project. The demographics are really small, it's just for little kids. I mean, big kids may go with their little siblings, but it's really not for kids or adults or anything. And between the staffing and maintenance of it, it was not a feasible project at all. And we went, actually looked at the numbers, not just picked a number off the top of our head, like it's done here. Playing fields and ballpark is not part of Park and Rec budget, should be on its own line. I mentioned that before. And the master plan, this is something that was started many years ago, but the funding couldn't be procured, so they even just the funding to put the RFP out. Couldn't be procured, there was some, I can't remember the exact information. Anyway, the town decided not to give Park and Rec the money to start it. Our current director stated when we were going through his interview process that the master plan that his former town did is now sitting in the bottom of a desk drawer, untouched, never used. They had much more than we do. We have 2 parks to consider to do a master plan. We've also had like Lori Doss come down previous years from Marblewood and took her science students over to Emery Park and then gave a presentation to the Park and Rec Commission. Very informative, it was really cool. There's a lot of things that can be done before we even talk about a master plan. We have not exhausted any of the options that were brought to us. The vehicle, I already said this, there's no reason for Park and Rec to have a $35,000 vehicle. I don't even see why Park and Rec needs an extra vehicle, but should they need one, there's lots of used things through the state surplus, blah, 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 that they can spend much more money for, or much less money for, and get it sooner because they could put it into a budget. Rather than waiting 5 years. If they truly need a car, why wait 5 years? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I know since then they have started looking at state cars or asking Ricky if he's got something. That's that, the capital. As far as the park, yeah.
Can you explain to me why the playing fields and ballpark should not be under Park and Rec?
Sure. While it is under Park and Rec purview, it's a totally separate thing. When Kent, I believe this is the right story, and if anybody remembers it differently. When Kent School decided that they were going to stop doing any maintenance on the Kent Center School fields, the current Board of Selectmen then, or not the current one, the Board of Selectmen then assigned all of the playing fields to Kent Park and Rec. At that time, the ball fields were under their own line item because it wasn't under Park and Rec purview at that time.
So a separate line item like Kent Volunteer Fire Department is?
If you look in the budget, it's just on its own line.
Okay.
But in the capital budget, it keeps getting mixed in with Park and Rec. So, like these numbers that are in here, the Park and Rec, or the ball field committee never even met because the director put these numbers in. So, so then the Board of Selectmen at that point said, I said, should this be put into the Park and Rec budget line? And they said no, and Barbara agreed to leave it out on its own. So that's where it still sits, even though Park and Rec has purview over the whole thing. Kent Center School used to also put funds into the maintenance line until Kent School decided not to, and they gave it everything to Park and Rec, so Kent Center School doesn't put any money into the maintenance line anymore. Even though they use them all. So that was something that a previous Board of Selectmen decided to do. As far as Emery Park, so there's $200,000 that have been sitting in that capital fund for years, you're right. Back in 10 or 11, when that money was put into the capital plan, for year 15, 16, whatever the exact numbers were. That was anticipation of the pool needing help, the pool needing repairs. The pool had not needed repairs until recently when it was abandoned and wasn't taken care of properly, and then we got a crack in the cement. Now, talk to your husband about fixing it and doing repairs that were needed because that money was available, but it was decided not to be done. The Park and Rec Commission has totally neglected Emery Park, the pool. They have not taken care of it for the winter. Thank God we didn't have a freezing winter because it would have made it so much worse. We recently purchased a new aerator. We recently put, this is recently before when I was on the commission, we fixed all the fencing to the fence gates and all the locks to make sure that they were all up to code. So the money has been put in anticipation of fixing the park back up. Those of us who grew up here know what a valuable, rare resource that pool is. So rare that the Torrey Canary Health doesn't even have like a category for it. So, you know, the repairs that were needed, like this re-cementing and stuff, could have easily been done, taken care of. Landscaping could have been done. As for the turtles, you either turn them into a science lesson or you put better fencing, small fencing, like chicken wire around the bottom so that this, you know, smaller than chicken wire because the snakes get in there, the frogs get in there. So if you don't want to use it as a science lesson, put better fencing around. It also runs off of the vernal pool, so there are filters in there, but we could definitely get better filters in there and make it cleaner. There's so many options. You could take the sand out and make it cleaner. You could put the sandbox somewhere else. You know, it's a beautiful piece of property. There's so much potential and we have the money to put in it. But the new commission, who, forgive me, are made up of all people new to the area who don't have a lot of value in the history of this park and who spent many years and days there with your children or swimming yourself or the swimming lessons. How long is Club Getaway going to let us use the club for summer camp? That was something that David did nicely because we didn't have lifeguards. He was still recovering from COVID, so he wasn't full, but I know he's cut it down a little bit already this year. Who knows when he's gonna say, okay, I can't do it anymore, then what do? We need Emery Park back. And that needs to be fixed, maybe use some of the money to upgrade the shed. But I know we'll have our meetings for this and I will be speaking more about it, but anybody have any questions?
Actually, that's very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the information.
Right. One of the things that I don't get a good handle on is that both from you. What the town folks actually think about Emery Park.
It's something that you come to meetings. That's the problem. To show up at the last minute budget meeting.
That's right.
And, you know, it's an event, it doesn't work.
Right.
Just to confirm with you, no maintenance is done by your,
For the fields,
yeah.
yeah, I remember Marty was on like a
We had,
planning commission or something, and I hadn't.
it was a ball field committee, a subcommittee, and it was made up usually of a BOE member, a Park and Rec member, and a member of the
It
public.
was brand new, like, wasn't it, when Marty joined 2 years ago, no, it was right before you left.
It's probably older than 3 years. I think we had it earlier and then it kind of fell by the wayside and then it got resumed, but I think, you know, it needs to be, I don't know if it needs to be redone because
Well, I don't.
it doesn't have anything to do with it except the use of it.
But we're waiting.
And I know our coaches were finishing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Overalls and stuff.
So Park and Rec has been doing work.
Yeah, Park and Rec's been, we don't have money in our budget.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
Just to confirm,
And there's the committee or whatever it is.
It's a
In the
commission.
process, commission, excuse me, but they're in the process of kind of fleshing out, you know, the long-term game plan for the whole operation, right?
yeah, that's what we got from Jared.
Right.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
right.
But right now, they're veering towards closing Emery Park, which is.
That's, I wouldn't say that that's accurate.
Yeah, what I hear is-
I went to the Park and Rec Commission meetings and talked to the
For instance, I
current.
know
program.
that there are other things going on.
Maybe that's too many people talking, I'm sorry, but
It's in the, I believe it's deed restricted that it has to be used for recreation.
Right, yeah.
thank you for that information.
In the last Board of Finance meeting, he actually admitted that they were probably gonna close, that they were veering towards closing Emery Park down, the pool.
What meeting was this?
I believe it was the last meeting,
Oh, I think you were. The capital meeting.
maybe.
That was a January meeting with when the capital plan was discussed, he was talking about.
Because I was quite surprised, I was like, oh, they finally admitted.
Well, but if I remember that meeting, it was, we had these other issues and it was getting cost prohibitive if we were. It's an interesting issue. I mean, the whole point is that if the town folks, if there's a special place for it, can we find a way in the capital planning process? But at the end, you also want to have a pool that works, right?
This
You know?
pool has always worked.
Yeah.
It's been working for 50, 60, 70 years now.
That's all.
Yeah, but it's gotta be
Right.
the town's.
Well, it's gonna make a commitment. I mean, it's one way or the other. That's
It
the,
needs to be the town's ultimate decision.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And then that 35,000 for the vehicle, that was part of what we moved, was because Jared worked with the commission and worked with Rick Osborne to find a very, very inexpensive vehicle.
And that was like for
It's
seniors,
surplus.
right?
No, it's for, they found it on the state surplus website, and it's for moving back and forth. So for instance, the basketball program over at Kent Center School. Kent Center School has no room for Park and Rec to store anything. So the basketballs for the program that runs 75 days a week has to go, all the 40 basketballs, or however many basketballs have to go over there, and 2 hoops for the little kids, and then they have to come back over here. So that's all being done by Jared's personal vehicle, and there's been some issues with a number of different materials, hauling back and forth. Okay. So he was able, I think they spent $6,000 and bought the used.
So obviously, when we get through the budget cycle, that's when we can look at some of these other issues, because we know we're about to get sucked into the budget completely.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's coming, it's
Right.
coming down the pipe, whether you're ready or not.
Exactly.
Left the station.
Yeah.
So.
Lynn's got her hand up.
Sorry,
To Jean, please, did they actually purchase a vehicle now? Is that what you said? So that came out of this year's budget? Of the extra, out of what line? Do we know what line?
I don't.
If it wasn't a capital asset.
So that vehicle, don't we have to pay like registration and insurance and all that stuff on it?
So that's the
If you
insurance.
go, yeah, it goes on our regular
fleet,
insurance
yeah.
policy.
So that's not your part of that comes out of,
I don't think it has.
And the town does it, and
it doesn't have to be
It's
registered.
our town plate.
So there's insurance on it, what line's that line?
All of our insurance comes out of the same line.
right.
So just to say, I don't even have a $35,000 vehicle.
Well, right, so it's sitting there, but it sounds like we.
No, but 35,000 for the next one.
Okay.
Just if anybody's interested, it's a very, very large legislative session this year. It's a long session, so every other year, there's a short, then there's a long, we're in a long. I think I'm watching 130 bills at this point, and those are really ones that have municipal. It's not all the other.
And I think the last meeting, and we were talking about emergency services.
Yes, we were.
And the unique aspects of some of the rural pockets included. And whether or not Lynn ought to be getting together with some of the other legislators from the smaller areas to say, gee, we need some help from the state on, you know.
Yeah, so there's a statewide, I think it's called the statewide EMS task force. Based on some legislation from last year, that task force has been meeting all year, They held a press conference 3 weeks ago, I think, and there were a number of small rural chief elected officials. They really wanted a big show of EMS and fire chiefs, but they did hand invite a number of small rural CEOs. I was invited, the Warren first selectman was invited. We both took the time to drive to Hartford and stand there and we were able to talk to Senator Anwar, who's pushing forth a number of bills to really look at the statewide, from a strategic standpoint, the statewide EMS system. And there's also a Medicaid bill to reimburse for EMS services who bill, which the Kent Volunteer Fire Department does, take, instead of getting reimbursed from Medicaid at the Medicaid rate, which is very, very low, it's literally like 10 cents on the dollar. And passing legislation so that those bills get reimbursed actually at the Medicare rate, which is much higher. So while that won't have a huge impact on our town, because our town is, our payer profile is more Medicare than it, I imagine Medicaid is a very small percentage, but it's these steps forward that are bringing visibility to this.
But I think we also need,
Association.
we also need, and this is where Maria's job is to say, you know, we looked at the budget numbers, we see how that number keeps going up, we need relief on this. If we don't ask for it, we're never gonna get it. And I actually think she needs to have a very specific ask on our behalf, whether she gets together with other reps from under similar circumstances, but that would have a significant impact budget wise for us if we were able to do something there. And if we leave it as a general thing, it's never gonna happen.
Right, so we had a conversation with Senator Anwar that day and talked to him about, for Ken, the impact on our budget. He was pretty, I would say he was surprised for a little town. So it was great to have these small towns be heard by the legislators in Hartford, especially the ones that don't ever come out here. So we were on a follow-up item asked to basically put together an executive summary that has what are the pinch points and the unique challenges for rural. So
And I would like to see Maria actually with a couple of other legislators literally draft something that says, here's the specific need, here's the amount we want in the budget from the state. And if we don't do that, we're never gonna get anything. So, I mean, that's just how the world works when it comes to state government, so.
And then it goes to committee and you gotta keep the pressure up on the
You got
committee.
it, right?
Later.
You know, but it's important for us. It is.
Very important.
Yeah.
So it's probably one of the biggest steps that's happened in the last.
Aren't you afraid they will then say, what's your mill rate? Saying what it is and not saying go pound sand, really, in all honesty.
Yeah, but you know what? It doesn't.
I know you have to
hurt
ask, I
Doesn't
get
hurt
the
to
point
ask.
of asking, but.
And it's also an indicator of a bigger problem.
Okay.
Right, so we're not a poor city, that's how we're looked at.
Right.
That's a reality. Not that I want the mill rate to go up, don't get me wrong, but
Nobody wants that.
nobody wants that,
Right.
but in reality, we're not in bad shape.
So any other comments? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? This is turning into the meeting after the meeting. Before I forget, would you please take down the posting for the Board of Finance clerk? It is still showing up on the website. So.